Hi, good evening, everybody. We are live with episode 2 of Data Jazzers. So, welcome everybody wherever you are joining from. And I would like to start with wishing all the ladies out there happy International Women's Day. So, and with that, we can start. So, Data Jazzers, we are here again, Nicola, myself, trying to provide you interesting speakers every second Tuesday, of each month, and not to stick to technical sessions strictly, but still we are chatting around Power BI, around data, but provide you more insights of who those people are behind those interesting blogs, videos or sessions. And I will not spend too much on introduction. So Nicola are known as Data Mozart, my co-host, myself running Stuttgart Power BI user group and also speaking a lot of sessions. But our guest today is pretty much well known, I would say, to everybody. And he's not just a recognized Power BI expert, especially when it comes to topics around everything Power BI, but he's also really well known for his blogs around analysis services, complex data models. He's member of Power BI CAT team. And Phil, I would say welcome, and you can say much more about yourself that I can do.
Oh no, thank you, Augustine, and they're very kind words. I do appreciate that. So, thanks for the very kind introduction, and hello everyone who are joining in today. Thanks for jumping on, and of course, hello Nicola as well.
Yeah, cool. So, Phil, thanks for the short introduction. Yeah, I suggest that we start slowly to put our story into the right context. Maybe not starting with classic Power BI topic, but maybe people don't know. But I heard in one of the previous webinars where you were guest that you have a farm, like a real farm, with cows and all the other inhabitants. So can you please share more details about that with us and our listeners, how that works for you? So it's a strange combination, working for Microsoft Power BI CAT team and having a farm with cows. So how do you manage all of this?
Well, it's not as bad as it sounds. It's not as hard. And the house where I live is actually shown in the background here. So this is the view I can see out the window when I look up and out the window. And it's not too dissimilar to that this morning. It's a very nice autumn morning. So it's not strictly a farm. Here in New Zealand, where I'm calling from, we do have a lot of space for the population. So it's not unusual for people to have what we call over here a lifestyle block. It's about 13 acres, 5 hectares, depending on which measurement you have. So it's more than enough space for a property, not quite big enough to run a whole commercial farm. But it's a bit of a waste to have that much land and not have any animals. So yeah, I'll have a mixture of cows, goats, sheep, chicken, lots of bees at the moment. I'm really enjoying, have done for a few years, making sure I get plenty of honey. There can't be too much better food for you than good natural honey from taken from the flowers that live around you. So so it really doesn't take too much time at all. If you have a small enough group of animals, they typically look after themselves. And working
kids.
from home definitely helps too.
And that's really interesting to hear. So it's we were discussing with a lot of people, but everybody has a different story. But I also never heard a combination of working as a IT consultant and having a farm. I think it's a great stress relief. On the other hand.
Oh, it's nice. Like every afternoon, I make sure I go for a walk. I walk my dog up to the back of the property, and that can be a half-hour round trip. And I'm on a hill, so there's plenty of spots that you can just stop and sit and enjoy the view, depending on the weather of the day, which can be just as spectacular when it's rainy and miserable, if you're dressed up properly, versus a beautiful blue sky day, for example. And one of the beauties about living on the bottom of the planet, miles away from all the factories of the big cities, is the air is so clear as well. So I'm actually 80 years old, don't you? Just kidding.
18 or
80. No, just
okay. I heard that N in the end. Okay.
Oh.
So if I understood well, you also produce your own honey.
Yes. So because I've got plenty of land, and I'm fortunate enough to have lots of a particular tree called Manuka tree around my area. So I connect with a local beekeeper who comes in and puts in 25, 30, 40 hives depending on the summer. And they look after the actual maintenance and feeding of the beehives and colony, and I'll help out because I just like figuring things like this out. And as part of that deal, I'll always make sure I will get a couple of boxes of frames. And in fact, this weekend just gone, I extracted a whole bunch of frames and got a great big bucket of honey from this summer, which goes into jars and give away to friends and family around this part of the world. But it's whenever you're going through the airport duty free and you see the New Zealand Manuka honey and you pick up a tiny little jar and you look at the price and go, what, how much? That's the honey that I can get in great big huge pails up the back of my property. So
okay. Can we order one package next year at Sequel Bits or something like this?
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm definitely going to come over to Sequel Bits next year. I'm not sure if I can fill everyone's orders. Otherwise, I'll just be bringing a suitcase full of honey. I'll definitely bring some.
Okay, perfect.
That's good to hear. And when we are talking that in the meantime, between the farm and everything, you are deep into ducks. What's your story behind it? How did you get there? And as far as I know, you used to work with traditional BI stacks, so coming from SQL background. How did you end up with ducks, and what's your story behind it?
Yeah, okay. So I didn't go to university. My first job when I was 18, back in 1991, so that's sort of giving you a bit of a time. I was straight from high school. And I went to work for an IT company. And part of that role was to build the software the company used. So we had to, there were no tools readily available. And this is pre-Windows days as well. So me and another individual, we actually built from the ground tools to help run the company, like keep track of customers and orders and inventory and all of this. And part of building those tools was to actually create the mechanism to store the data in files. Spacing out the correct number of bits or bytes for things like first name, last name, phone number, etc. And you would know that one complete packet of data. We didn't really think of terms like rows and records and columns, etc. But we knew that a particular record might be 127 bytes long, for example, and we would fill up these files and know where to jump to in terms of the position of the file. And then eventually, when the files got too large, came up with some techniques to create smaller files with the smaller amount of data, which we didn't realize at the time, but was effectively like an index. And figuring out how to speed things up by sorting these indexes to speed up the ability to jump to read, to write data in these files. And this was all network multi-user, but it was quite painstaking as well. But it was very much working with data. So I sort of learned from pretty much day one of my working career, the fairly low level what was important and being able to store data quickly and retrieve data quickly. What were those really efficient ways? Not so much on the graphic side, because as I said, this was pre-Windows. And then after a few years, discovered a very early version of SQL Server, which on one hand was really great because I could now I didn't have to do all that painstaking work of figuring out exactly how to build and maintain these files. It was just the engine would do that all for you. And of course, learning the SQL language as well was a real epiphany. Like, oh, wow, it's just so easy to do things like inserts, updates, and deletes, etc. So But I think it was quite important to get that grounding where I was having to do the work by hand and figuring out, sometimes what are the most efficient ways to join two files together. The concepts that I learned later were termed things like loop join, merge join, hash join, what's expensive, what's hard, and what's easy. So what then typically I did with work was I found myself gravitating to contracting and consulting roles that use T-SQL heavily. And again, in this sort of world, this was my pre-BI world. I was developing systems that would take data from one very big system, Transact system that might have had data stored in a certain way, and having to sort of merge it into another system and do quite complicated transformations along that way. And there's always pressure to make sure that the whole job itself was robust, efficient, and reliable. So again, I would get down to what I think was quite advanced and low-level data work as part of that for many years. But then at some point, I think just by a sheer coincidence, it was around 2011. I was given a requirement to build a web-based tool for this big New Zealand retailer that I was working for. And the web-based tool needed to represent sales data and cost data for a chain of supermarkets. So I thought, okay, I've done quite a lot of coding work. I can probably start creating a web app from scratch. So I got, chart control, etc., and paired that up with some really sophisticated and elaborate T-SQL. But as part of researching that, I had my next epiphany where I discovered what was called at that point performance point server, and also my first taste of SQL analysis services, where again, all this work was done for you, where you could, load data into a database that was optimized for this, the ability to do pivot tables, etc. And Performance Point took care of all the web board. So this was really my first foray into BI. And I even bought a book at this point. I forget what the title of it was, but the three book authors back in about that era, 2010, 2011, were Chris Webb, Alberto Ferrari, and Marco Russo. And I think they'd all been doing BI for 10 years. So that was when I first started learning the art of star schema and how to build a proper cube, etc. And I started learning MDX to what I think was quite an advanced level. But it was during this period where, for this organization, once I got everything up and running, I really discovered the truth. That's the book. Yep, that's the book that's showing that.
That's the one.
I need to get Chris to sign my book. It's still on my shelf, actually. But as part of this work, what I discovered was when I made this web page available, and pretty much anyone in this organization could get access to sales for products, and they could break it down by week, they could break it down by month, they could look at costs, they could look at profit. And there was a person who, their role was not BI. They worked at a supermarket, probably stacking shelves or ordering a product or something, but they had access to this web tool as an end user. And they looked at it in the evening in their own time, and they discovered that the supermarket chain was running a promotion every so often with a big multinational drinks company. And what they discovered by getting access to the data in this format was the supermarket company was actually making a loss on this. They were making quite a significant loss. So the individual was able to take the data, present it to the relevant senior people, and say, hey, you probably don't appreciate this, that on the surface, what looks like a good deal for us as a company is actually losing us money. And it turned out to be true. It was quite a significant amount of money. And it paid for the purchase of the Performance Point tools and the analysis services license. And that was when I really, truly appreciated the power of good BI. If you can democratize data like that and get it in front of any number of people who just look at the world different ways and give them the flexibility to just play with it, put things on columns that were on rows and vice versa, and drill down and just explore, there's so many good nuggets in the data. And then, so I was sold. That was it. I was just going to only do BI data work from then on in. So I was pretty convinced. And then a little while later, because I built a couple of BI platforms like this for big New Zealand companies, I'd kind of caught the eye of the local Microsoft account team here, and they got me to speak at the big TechEd conferences here in New Zealand. And I was able to share some of these powerful stories. And, as part of this work, I discovered personally that the community is such a fantastic way to learn and share. And this was quite a new thing to me, because up until that point, I'd always just got on by myself and just figured stuff out on my own, perhaps with help of a book or something. But, I'd really hadn't taken advantage of listening to other people, and just didn't appreciate the community was as valuable as I discovered at that point. And I mean, figuring stuff out on your own is it works, but it's not a smart strategy. I really think I was quite dumb up until that point. And then Microsoft, they put me on a course here in Wellington that the great Peter Myers was teaching, and that was where I was introduced to the new in-memory tabular version of AS that had only really just come out. We were using up until that point, I was only using MDX and multidimensional, etc. And I tried Dax out, and I found it confusing. I found it hard and unnecessarily clumsy compared to MDX. So I left it. I didn't actually do much with Dax for quite a number of years. And I think that's probably true of a lot of people when they first play with Dax. It's like, oh, this seems confusing.
Which year it was? Which year it was when you first saw Dax?
Oh, possibly 2013.
Okay.
2014, but it was a brief introduction. It's not like I started building things from that day. I sort of like tried it out. Maybe I tried to do something simple like a period comparison or a cumulative total, classic thing. It's like, oh no, I don't know how to do this. It's easier in MDX. I'll just do it in that. And I only really came back to Dax once Power BI came out. I'd seen slightly earlier versions of Power BI. Microsoft had, built some components in Excel like Power Maps, etc. I think there was a Project Crescent, etc. And it looked kind of nice, but it was all baked into Excel. And again, you had to do this Dax thing. But when Power BI came out, that really blew me away. And also the company I was working for at the time had done a bit of some work to decide what BI tool they wanted to use as their client. And it was very early. Power BI was very immature, but we bet on it. And, I at that point, I figured I better start learning Dax. But this time around, I didn't decide to learn Dax the hard way, the slow way, the really just do it by myself, maybe buy a book or something. I went back to the community to learn. So I started my own Power BI group here in Wellington. So that's been running about 6 years now. And I see Jeff's on the call. Hey, Jeff. And and I did that selfishly for myself because I wanted to see what other people were doing with Power BI, and I wanted to steal their ideas and learn from them. And also got heavily involved in the community.powerbi.com website because there are forums there where people are posting all sorts of challenges and problems. How do I do this period comparison? With a ranking over subcategories, and then the next
and real life challenges. So it's not like
totally.
a book.
And I learned so fast from there. Like when I first started trying to solve these questions myself, my answers were terrible, and I compared myself with what people were posting, and I sort of tried it out myself, and very slowly over time, pennies started to drop, and I just really, really enjoyed the community element to that. Like I would, after dinner to relax at night, some people like puzzles, some people watch TV. I go, oh, there's some interesting challenges, and I'll mock up some dummy data and see if I can come up with a bunch of different ways to solve this. And in the back of my head, I had all that experience with T-SQL and all that experience of building data, that I could draw upon as well to help me figure out, well, why is this slow? Why is this particular join perhaps quite expensive compared to this other approach? And I think exposing myself to lots of different problems was great, because whoever you work for at the time will have some problems, but you don't get the breadth or the broadness from other places. And then eventually I learned enough, and I guess I helped enough people on the forums that I was lucky enough to pick up my MVP. And that gave me opportunities to talk to people and connect with people that I previously wouldn't have been able to. So that was really great. And as part of that, I was offered the opportunity to write a book, just a beginning Dax book. And I thought, there's some great books out there. I'm never going to match the fantastic content that people like Marco and Alberto put out. But from my perspective, because I came from SQL and I didn't really see an awful lot of content around saying someone who writes a lot of SQL, here's how you would translate that to perhaps write Dax. So I thought I'll have a crack at that. And when I agreed to do the book, I had no idea if I'd even get past 1 or 2 chapters. But hey, I like a challenge. I give it a crack, and I managed to get out a book that I think's okay. I do have plans to come back and hopefully revise that book when I get time. I do have plenty of leave backed up, so perhaps I might be able to whiz through that and start putting in some of the great learnings that I've been fortunate enough to pick up since I've started on Microsoft. So and yeah, after I was an MVP for a little while, I managed to catch the eye of some people in Microsoft by going over to the US and attending conferences like MBAS, speaking, shared the stories about that my experience building BI platforms back in New Zealand. And about 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to start on the CAT team, which was quite small at those days, but still names like Adam and Patrick from the Guy on a Cube, Matthew Roach, Casper, Sergey, Daniel. The team was small, but I was just it was a great opportunity.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to build on that,
and how I got into Dax.
Mm-hmm. And then that's what I want to build on that. What you just said, and
I can't hear you. Sorry, I think you're still on mute, Nicola.
I hear him well.
Okay.
I still can't hear you. Sorry.
Do you hear me, Phil?
Can you? No, something's happened. Oh, I need to turn my speaker on. Sorry.
No problem.
My Bluetooth speaker timed out.
Okay.
How unprofessional is that?
No worries. No worries. Can you hear me now?
Oh, still nothing, Phil.
Yes, I hear you now. Sorry, I lost you there.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, then I wanted just to build on what you just said about your joining Microsoft and Power BI CAT team, and for us, and I think for all the others, are very interesting because Matthew recently wrote a blog post explaining the different perspectives of being. He compared this with a car driver versus engineering the car engine. So what's your take on this, using Power BI in your day-to-day work to solve some problems, and then now be part of the team that is responsible for implementation of different features and so on?
And that's a great analogy. I mean, one of the fantastic things about working on this team is you're just working with so many people that are so smart, and Matthew is without exception one of the smartest. So I do agree with that analogy, and I do like car analogies. Like I actually quite like analogy about aggregations on Formula One cars as well. But no, he's right. A great driver. Well, they're quite different roles. But what you do also need to remember that is a great driver doesn't make a great engineer, and vice versa. But a driver alone doesn't win the Formula One race. Every single team member plays that part, and whether you're the mechanic or the designer or the person in the seat, everyone plays their part. And it's a team effort. And I mean, being on the CAT team, personally for me, the learning stepped up a lot when I joined the Power BI team, because previously, even as an MVP, the engine itself was very much a black box. I could experiment by tapping the box and just trying out little experiments, hypotheses. Hey, if I write Dax this way, what happens? Whereas, once I started, I had much better access to so many elements of the internals. In fact, one of the first things I did was schedule a regular weekly catch-up with one of the senior architects of the original AS engine, and who's been very, very closely involved in the design of both the multidimensional and tabular elements. And I still have that regular weekly meeting catch-up, and it's a mixture of, hey, here's a problem I'm working on as part of my CAT role, let's talk this through, and I'll learn. But while we're also talking about that, let's just go on a bit of a tangent and help me understand more about this particular element of the engine. And it's generally from the inner geek, just wanting to find out, okay, back in my days when I was building my own proprietary simple database engine and I took this approach, how does that actually get solved in an AES? And surprisingly, a lot of it's quite similar, the concepts and understanding. So I can get that. As I said, I do like learning, and I did realize that community gives you that opportunity to share. So another thing I do as part of the my role in CAT is I make sure I share in a way that wasn't previously visible to me as an MVP previously. So I do run like a regular series of monthly technical deep dives for MVP. Sadly, it's not a public thing because we do have a lot of NDA content there.
Sadly,
yeah. But the idea is to connect our very, very senior engineer superstars at Microsoft who you just would never even heard of before on a monthly call with our MVPs where they can describe and discuss very deep technical topics in deep technical ways. It's a real geek out session. It's good fun for me. I love it. But what this does is it provides the MVPs who get onto these calls with a lot more authority and a lot more understanding about how this black box actually works, so they can then go and create blogs and present and share and hopefully scale and teach a much wider the community, basically a lot more about how to get the best out of this fantastic engine that we know as AES. So
as Jeff said, I'm powered by VertiPack engine. That's a good one.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So just a question connected to that. So as you are coming from a SQL background, probably that's one of the reasons why you are prefer using Visual Studio Code for some of the things. I think you are the only blogger out there which is actively promoting Visual Studio Code to use it with VertiPack engine with Power BI. What's the story behind it?
Well, I guess it's just, again, appeals to the inner geek. I know it's fun. It's really flexible because you're working at script level, so you can iterate over any part of the model you want to. You can read about any part of the model you like. You can write to any part of the model, and you can create macros for what it's worth. A lot of people have done a lot of VBA in Excel world where they sort of build themselves nice little utilities to sort of clean data or fix things, improve their model, etc. But one of the neat things about using VS Code at that sort of API level is it can be completely automated. So once you refine and develop some tools that perhaps help you do tasks that are helpful to you in your day job, it's a really small jump to having this automated and just, I'll run this every morning. And as part of the VS Code, because you're in a C# world, you can say, well, email me or tweet me or tell me or log some output about the outcome of this. Because one of the other things that I am proud of is that I'm quite lazy. I do like to script and automate where possible anything at all to replace mundane, repetitive activities, just to save me time. So to me, VS Code just presents that complete blank canvas where I can pretty much do whatever I like. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is I would never say this should be your first port of call. We've got some fantastic community tools like Dax Studio and Tabular Editor especially, and they should probably be your go-to as your starting point. But it's nice to know that you can then drop down into a lower layer if you need to really start getting quite clever and funky in ways that UIs and community tools probably don't need to worry about ever building, because the use case is just so rare and unusual.
Yeah.
And I do get exposed to some quite interesting tasks as part of my specialist role on DAX and data modeling with the CAT team. So having a ready-made suite of tools that I've built that I know how they work, that work the way I like them to work, just save me an awful lot of time. I can connect to an engine, authenticate, and boom, I can learn so much about what's going on using the tools that I've built. And as I said, it just appeals to the inner geek.
You are not lazy. I will quote Patrick from Guy in the Cube. You are just efficient.
Efficient. That's the one. Yes.
Not lazy, but efficient.
There is an interesting question in a chat by Jeff Weir, so I'll put it on a screen. So, what 3 ideas on the site we should be voting for on Power BI ideas?
Oh, look, that's a hard question to answer for Jeff because the only ideas he looks at are the data viz ideas, and I have long distanced myself from any attempt to be a data viz expert. I thought I wasn't too bad before I started at Microsoft, but after seeing some of the expert data viz capabilities, I thought, no, I'm not going to spend time trying to get good at something I'm never going to be good at. I'm going to focus on the database engine. Ideas. That's put me on the spot. Perhaps number one, I'd really love the ability to create calculation groups inside Power BI Desktop. That would be pretty cool. I'm a big fan of web-based data modeling as well. So having the ability to do more in the browser to a published data set around editing, updating, measures, etc., seeing relationships, creating relationships. I think we are doing quite a bit of that work this year. So, but by all means, vote those up. There's a couple there. Sorry, it's not 3.
And just looking at the question, so Sandeep also had an interesting question. So, with all the blogs from CAT team members, how come they're not included in official Power BI Docs blog?
I don't know the official answer for this, but I do know that any content that goes on a Microsoft.com website, be it documents, blog, a lot of work goes into the language, making sure that it's Microsoft appropriate. Legal potentially might get involved. There's a very Microsoft style that everything needs to meet that you would expect of an organization like Microsoft. Whereas personal blogs, you pretty much have the freedom to write in the style that you like, that you can let your personality come through. You can describe things the way, in your opinion, that they work, and you don't need to worry about that being taken as, oh, well, this is the new terms and conditions of how Power BI must work. So in some ways, there's a lot of freedom we have to describe things in our own words. But as soon as you make them as part of an official Microsoft site, then I suspect the bar about making sure the language, etc., is corporatized and safe is quite high there. We've got some amazing teams that produce the content for the Microsoft Docs site, and in fact, some of the work we do on the CAT team is we'll encounter some challenges or some interesting problems or issues. We'll find some quite clever solutions, and we will actually share that to some document writers who will create guidance and put it onto a website. In fact, one page I would recommend is like the Power BI guidance website. It's like aka.ms/PBI guidance. If you go there, there are quite a few articles that are the direct result of lessons learned by various members of the CAT team, but we haven't written those articles. We've created the notes. We've given to someone like Peter Myers, who's a fantastic document creator, and he turns it into a version of the document which is Microsoft approved. Sorry, long answer, but we got there.
Yeah, but it's helpful. Yeah, one more question. This is protection. Tom is my friend, and also you all authored the book together. So Tom asks, with all the latest features like hybrid tables and auto aggregations, bringing imported and direct query data closer together, should the DAX become more agnostic of the source? And he explained that he means that the engine should be able to create a smarter SQL statement. What's your opinion?
And hi, Tom. Thanks for jumping on. Yeah, I agree. It would be nice. I think it's one of those things that is harder than it looks, because you can't just treat one data source. You have to consider every data source, and how many data sources can we talk to in direct query mode in Power BI? It's huge, and all the various subtle dialects of even SQL, vary whether you're talking Microsoft SQL, Oracle, Postgres, Redshift, and other flavors, etc. I think the Power Query team typically own that work, and I think they do a pretty good job. They probably are always evolving that too. But of course, you have other challenges like a lot of these data sources aren't BI tools. So the what you can do in a line or two of DAX or MDX can be quite a complex series of lines in T-SQL, especially when it comes to things like pivoting and other things. So it's not as straightforward. It's getting easier. I mean, the true answer is, or the purist is, probably just get your data in the right shape or format so that your DAX doesn't need to be complex, and the query expression that gets sent to the direct query source, if it happens to be a direct query, should be simple, and then the data in the tables that it's hitting is already star schema, ready to go, pre-calculated. So in a purist world,
inner joins and everything else.
Exactly. So that the query expression that Power BI sends to the source hopefully is actually simple and not having a need to do super complex things as well. Push that upstream. Another Matthew Roachism as well. Data transformation as far upstream as necessary. I forget the exact words, but there you go. I've mentioned Matthew twice.
As upstream as possible and as downstream as necessary.
Yeah, I need a hat or a t-shirt or something. I totally agree with that. Yeah, keep your DAX simple. If you're writing complex stacks, that should probably be an alarm, a flag. Is like, okay, maybe if I solve this in the data model, push it upstream, pre-calculate. If I can, where practical, then I'm going to probably have better success and better outcomes.
Yeah, and when we are talking about things and creative things, so your blog series about creative aggregation is, I think, really changed the world for a lot of people out there, because you expose there a lot of great things. So really congratulations on that. I read it myself multiple times over and over. Can we expect something similar in the future, or maybe a book out of it?
Potentially. I did actually consider that a couple of times, because when I did those blog articles, they were quite long articles, so there wouldn't be terribly much, I guess, to convert them into chapters. And I think I just got on a bit of a roll one period over about 6 or 7 weeks, and I had thought quite deeply about aggregate tables and how they can speed up data models. And again, this goes back to what I mentioned earlier when I was much younger, and creating proprietary systems to try and really quickly find data, store data, whatever. And I really recognize the power of aggregations, but also over time worked out that aggregation tables don't necessarily have to be simple. And a lot of people make the mistake that they only think of aggregations in one style. You can actually create lots of different flavors. So I don't know why they just seem to stick in my mind, and I managed to do a bit of a brain dump to those articles. I'm currently in the middle of a more an introductory series of articles on aggregations. I wouldn't say they're super sophisticated or great, but hopefully I'll get back to that soon. I've just been too busy with work, unfortunately. I feel really bad about this.
We are waiting for this for you to get back to this.
Yeah. So I do feel bad about this. I feel guilty. My backlog is growing. I talked to Chris about this, and I'm hoping that because we are hiring a whole bunch of people on the CAT team, that I'm going to be in a position soon where I can get back and put out a fresh blog once every couple of weeks. I shot myself in the foot a little bit, though, because initially when I did a blog, I would just go and write it up, half an hour, publish. That was it. Lazy, efficient, whatever you call it. But more recently, I've felt, okay, it'd be nice to do just a small video, so that, because not everyone likes reading. Some people just like watching, and vice versa. And something else, doing videos, doing, there's quite a bit of work that goes into producing a blog now. So I always just go, should I do with all this Microsoft work that I've got backed up, or should I do a blog? I should really do the Microsoft work. So unfortunately, but I will get there. Hopefully in a few months, I'll have get a bit more time to start cranking out that content. It's and I hope to stick to a rhythm of about once every 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. There's no way I'll keep up with Chris Webb.
Yeah, he told us that he set his goal to write every Sunday, so like once per week. Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
He's been doing that for about 150 years too. So content. He's got a blog on everything, and that's awesome. I'm so impressed, and I do talk to Chris every week as well.
He was on our first episode a month ago, so we chatted about it. So he's really blogging from prehistoric times, and I think one of the first people out there doing this part of Microsoft business.
And you do learn. You learn yourself as well, because often when you put yourself into a position of, right, I'm going to write this blog, I kind of know the subject, but now I just really got to figure out a few gaps in my knowledge to finish it off properly. So there is benefit for yourself as well.
And when you publish it, then you get comments from other people, from community, that opens completely different perspective.
Definitely true. Yes. So
okay, so you mentioned that you have a pleasure to work with some of the brightest people in Power BI Cat team. So what's the best thing, if you can extract one thing, what's the best thing to be being part of this Power BI Cat team, except those that you are working with most talented people?
I'd say the answer is not necessarily technical. I think the team has just got a really good culture, a really good approach to data, a really good approach to helping people out. A lot of the people on the team have come through the community again, and they've had that epiphany moment, from the same as I had, that you actually really accelerate your own personal learning when you get involved in learning and sharing in the community. And I think they all genuinely enjoy that, but that also gets reflected internally as well. So whenever we regularly catch up we just have a good culture, and we've grown a lot in the last few months. There's been quite a few people added, some amazing talent, which I'm looking to take advantage of as well. But
when you're talking about the Cat team, so the question I heard around conferences and everywhere a million times is, how do we hire a Cat team to come and build something for us? So for whoever it is.
To build something?
To support on some of the topics. So is there a process to get a Cat team on a project? Somebody from a Cat team?
Oh, look! Everyone seems to be on Twitter, so just chat on Twitter, just ask on Twitter, and if you don't ask, you don't get. And if you can bribe people with some nice food and or whatever people like to drink, a few people on the team perhaps enjoy their beer much more than they should. That's always good. But probably again, one of the number one things is the most attractive thing to people on the Cat team is the more community people that'll be there, the more interesting it is for people. Like, we've got SQL Bits starting on the weekend, and I think half of our team are out of office because they're all in London. Not only, I guess, also desperate to be back in person with in a real life event, but just being around the community. And I'm really excited and looking forward to seeing all the tweets coming out of that as well. And I'll do my best to be there for next year's SQL Bits. So I think having the bigger the community engagement, the more likely you are to get more of the Cat team there. And they do definitely like their food, believe me.
But you said beer also.
Oh yes. Some of them definitely like. Not everyone, but
who are they?
Sorry,
who are them?
I couldn't possibly break any.
Is it
GDPR,
NDA or
privacy reasons, legal?
Okay.
I enjoy my beer.
Fine.
I can say that.
Yeah. Okay. Dax Games. I think you are the most famous around, not just because of creative aggregations and optimizing big models and everything else, but Dax Games, I think you are, if not the first one, the most famous one who started building Dax Games? Where this idea came from? And
well, it kind of started when I was getting involved in community.powerbi.com on the forums. I mentioned earlier about how I found it quite interesting getting exposed to all the different types of challenges and puzzles that people were presenting. And, after a while, I think I set myself a new challenge. I thought, okay, I'm starting to see similar patterns. I'm not really seeing too much new. So how am I going to learn Dax a different way than what I'm getting through from community.powerbi.com? So I thought, and I think this possibly also coincided with the talk at TechEd, me appreciating that, hey, the community is a great place to learn and share as well. So I might have a crack at writing a blog, but what am I going to write about? There's already probably a ton of blogs on how to do period comparisons or whatever on Dax. So I thought I might have a crack at creating a blackjack game, and that'll help me figure out what are the boundaries, how far can I actually push Power BI. And I sort of set myself a personal limitation that I would only use native properties of Power BI, because of course you could always just create a custom visual or a Power App, and you're not really using Power BI. I mean, yes, you are, but I thought I'll live within those constraints and just see how much of a game I could create. And I made a pretty ugly attempt at blackjack. You could play a hand, it would generate some random numbers, and you could play against the house. And depending on when you hit or held or whichever, you could only play one hand. There was no betting. But of course, I discovered that what's missing in Power BI, which is from other programming languages, which is a concept of state, being able to just write to a variable globally and come back and update it and read for it and work out where have I come from, where am I now, and all these sorts of things. So I was like, okay, this is quite cool. So while the game itself was ugly, I enjoyed the challenge. So then I did about 6 or 7 other ones on a bit of a roll. So from memory, there was a Sudoku game where you were just trying to solve a puzzle that was interesting. Hangman, where you had to guess a Dax function. So if the Dax function was concatenate, you had an 8-letter word or however many letters, and you could guess C, and you'd see the letter. I did that with Mike Carlo, which was great fun. Tic-tac-toe, so a little bit of a crack at AI. So you could make a game at noughts and crosses by clicking on a corner, and Power BI would respond. And you'd play another position, it would respond. So that was kind of interesting to do in Dax. Minesweeper was fun. That had some really interesting challenges that I was quite pleased with. How to solve the challenge of, everyone knows the Minesweeper game, I assume, that when you click on a blank square and it reveals a really irregular shape around, depending on where the mines are, etc. So being able to solve that in Dax was quite neat again. And I really was starting to learn new things that I hadn't actually had to think about before. The ones that people probably remember the most were a 2D maze. So I could start with a CSV file. You could open the CSV file in Excel, and if you size the rows and the columns the same height, you could just put a whole bunch of X's around to make walls and corners and shapes, and then you'd import the CSV file, and Power Query would convert the data into what we needed, so that you could drive a little character around the maze to find the exit. There's no concept of baddies trying to shoot at you or anything, because again, it was missing state. But at least you could, using slices and filters, know where your XY position was. To know what to draw around you in the matrix, like how close are you now to this wall? Okay, if I move one space closer to it on the slicer, I now need to redraw everything, just offset, etc. Which was fun. And then of course, the what looked quite visually neat was the 3D version of that, which only took me about 2 hours to do, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I already had all the pieces there with the 2D game. So to go from an XY position looking down to be an XYZ position, looking out at a 3D world was quite a simple modification. I didn't have to rewrite the bit to suck in the CSV file or anything. And even the maths, I didn't have to design from scratch. I just Googled perspective algorithms and got this short little piece of maths that had like cosine and tan and sin, and so, okay, that seems to work. I'll just drop that into a measure. And sure enough, when you had the concept of, all right, well, if I'm standing in this position, looking at that direction, and here's the coordinates of my 3D world, how do I need to draw that in a way that it looks 3D? And I was actually quite surprised how easy and quick that was. And all of these games are on my blog site, dax.tips, that you can download the PBIX. You can read the blog that says step by step how these all work, so you can play with them yourself, experiment, tweak, make it better. All completely useless. There's no business value at all from these games, but
when you are talking and explaining, it seems like everyone can build a game. Like it's
mate,
easy, it's simple.
I'd say so. Yeah, it's a complete waste of your time unless you just want to perhaps improve your Dax. But I did enjoy, once I did start at Power BI, showing some of these very senior engineers who architected the AS engine and say, hey, look what I did with your AS engine and how I'm abusing your product. And that was kind of fun, because they're like, no, this is not what we built analysis services for. You should not be using Dax for this. So that was satisfying.
Yeah, nice. And there is some exclusive news that you want to share with our watchers today. I heard that.
Yeah. So I haven't done this for a little while, and I'll try and share my screen. Don't show these tips again. Which screen? Can you see the screen now? Is it a white Power BI screen?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Now it's quite big. I'll go into the game. Now, who remembers the Mastermind game from when they were young? The idea of this game is you're trying to guess a pattern of some colors and pegs, and you get a score when you make a guess that tells you how many colors are the right color in the right hole, or the right color in the wrong hole, etc. And I did this with, I collaborated with a local amazing designer in this part of the world, Kerry Kolosko, who did all the visual design, and I just took part of the guessing game. So the idea is I have 8 turns, and I've got 4 positions that I want to guess. So I might say, I'm going to guess a couple of blues, and this is probably going to run slow because I'm presenting. And I'm not going to play the whole game, trust me. And I will write this up. And hopefully you can see this all right, that it's not too zoomed out.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's just my very old laptop is probably.
Is it a slicer?
These are slicers, yeah. So they're just showing emoji colors. And when we're ready, this is going to be my guess. I'm going to click the check button, and what's going to happen is my guess here is going to be placed into the first row as my first guess of 8. And these little pegs here are going to tell me how many of my pegs are the right color in the right position, how many are the right color but in the wrong position. So what this is telling me is green. One of these pieces is the right color in the right position, and 2 of them are wrong. So the right color in the wrong way, and one of them is just the wrong color. Now, there's some quite neat Dax here, because within this game, let's say the actual guess that we're trying to do has 2 blue positions, and you guess 3 blue positions. It has to know that the third one can't be counted. So there's a lot of iterators inside iterators that go and figure out and rank and sort to try and understand where you're up to, etc. Now, I'm not going to try and guess this in front of you because it's a little bit too tricky, but you can do things like, hit the X and bring it back. And I might just play one more guess without thinking too hard to give you the idea, because it's playable all the way down to the bottom. So if we just go red, and I don't know what the answer is here, because it changes every day, and you get 5 games every day as well. And I started this before Wordle, but it does have a very Wordle flavor to it. So if you do like Wordle, and you do remember Mastermind, then perhaps this could be quite good. And it actually plays pretty nicely on your mobile phone if you've got the publish to web link, and you just bring this up, it all shrinks down nicely. You can use your fingers to just, perhaps while you're on the bus or the train, have a crack. Let's put a blue in here, and I'll hit the check button. And this is a terrible guess, but using the answers here, maybe I can start using some logic and refining. All right, get closer and closer to the right position. And here we go. So it's now telling me that in my second guess, I've got at least one of these 4 is the right color in the right position, and they're all different from up here. So between this one and this one, we've got 2 colors in the right position, etc., etc. So hopefully I'll get the blog out shortly. I did promise to do it a few weeks ago, but and there'll be a link that you can share and play and have a look at the Dax if you want to. Have a look at the approach, because you know, this is all interleaving bookmarks and some techniques to give you the feel of a game while not actually playing a game. So
yeah,
so
I personally, I would be very interested to see that Dax behind.
Yeah, it was harder than I initially thought it needed to be. I thought it would be like just a few lines of Dax. It probably ended up to be about 12 or 13, just simply because of the nature of, you know, sometimes you just might have more colors, more of the same colors than there are positions, and you the way you need to solve how many of those are should be counted and how many shouldn't be counted is not as straightforward. So, but it's good. So yeah, it was nice to be able to do one again, and I do have a plan for another one, which I'll hopefully also get to do with Kerry, and we'll do that a month or 2 later. I'm the one that's the slow part here. So,
and Jeff asked if you're. Agustin, go ahead.
Yeah, go. Yeah, just Jeff just asking, are you using calculation groups in games?
I'm a big fan of calc groups, but all my older games were done before calc groups were around, and this one didn't need them. So if it makes sense and I can use them, then I will definitely. But I haven't needed to for this one here.
Just one to wrap it up. We are soon to the end of time, but if to all the people starting in Power BI and Dax out there, so 0 to cat team, what would you suggest for them to learn first, and what are the most important things?
So just from a pure Dax perspective, I think if you're an out-and-out beginner, the 3 things you probably need to focus on would be getting your syntax sorted. So just making sure you know where the reference guides are and figuring out like where to use brackets and commas, etc. So just get your syntax sorted, figure out filters. And this is a really important one. You know, just remember, for every single data point in a cell or on a line chart or on a bar chart, you know, every single value is influenced in some way by a filter. Now, a filter can come from the visual itself. A filter can come from a slicer. A filter can be baked into the calculation you do. But once you figure out filters, you know, that is a really, really big jump, I think. And finally, loops. Every language has some form of looping construct, and Dax is no different here. You know, so once you figure out the power of iterators and loops, you know, with filters and syntax, and filters, remember, you can clear filtering as well. Then for a beginner, I would focus on syntax, filters, and loops. Intermediate user, what I would tell someone is Dax is surprisingly like SQL. So if you do have some SQL background, that can be helpful to an intermediate person. So if you're trying to figure out how to solve something complex in Dax, A, you shouldn't probably, but B, how would you solve it in SQL and then map that across? You know, how would I solve this in SQL? Because it's probably not too different in Dax. Finally, for the advanced people, you know, I would recommend just learn about the 2 engines inside analysis services, the storage engine and formula engine. So look to see what they're doing. You know, use the information they present to help you find those better query plans. And, you know, jumping back to what I again mentioned earlier about building a proprietary system, figure out what's expensive and slow, find that information out and what the storage engine tells you. You know, if you're doing the same task over and over and over again in a storage engine, then, you know, there's probably a good opportunity for you to optimize your Dax by properly understanding those engines. They would be my tips for beginner, intermediate, and advanced users.
Great tips. Great tips.
But hopefully this has been helpful. Thank you so much for inviting me on this session. It's definitely an honor to be after Chris Webb, or was he warmed the session up for me, maybe.
And maybe you warmed up for Will Thompson, which is coming up next month.
Ah, nice. That'll definitely be a good one. Very, very, very nice guy.
Thank you,
funny
Phil. Thank
character.
you very much for joining us and for saving your time to be part of our webcast.
No, and everyone who signed on and jumped on, thanks for jumping on, and hopefully catch up with you all in person at some point soon, later this year or next year, as we get to get around a lot more. So
you'll remember the part for the honey.
Absolutely, yep. I will always take some honey. So
yeah. Thank you, Phil, and have a great day.
You too. See you later. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Ciao.